welcome to all of you from IMA. I hope the breakfast was good. No reaction. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to look at book lovers and the literature lovers from Indore, and especially our members. So once again, a very warm welcome from the bottom of my heart. We are thrilled to have you with us for this exclusive event, the much-awaited book review session, featuring the remarkable life and learnings of one of India's greatest visionaries, Jamshedji Tata. Before we proceed any further, we'll begin today's event with the auspicious lamp lighting ceremony, symbolizing knowledge and enlightenment. I would now like to invite our esteemed dignitaries for the lamp lighting ceremony. Mr. Harish Bhatt, Mr. R. Gopalkrishnan, our guest speakers today. Dr. Himanshu Rai, Director, IIM Indore and Chairman, IMA Indore. Mr. Naveen Khandelwal, President, IMA Indore, and Mr. Santosh Munchal, Director, IMA Indore. Today's event is truly a celebration of his incredible journey and the corporate lessons he has left behind for future generations. It is indeed a privilege to have with us the distinguished authors, Mr. Harish Bhatt, Advisor and Director at Tata Group, and Mr. R. Gopalkrishnan, Author and Corporate Advisor, in person to share their valuable insights from their inspiring book, Jamshedji Tata, Powerful Learnings for Corporate Success. The Tata Group is a name synonymous with excellence, values and visionary leadership. And this legacy traces back to its founder, Shri Jamshedji Tata. His life has some very powerful lessons in innovation, resilience and strategic thinking for the corporate world. Today, we shall delve into his story and discover those valuable lessons for success in business and beyond. I am taking the liberty to share two of his quotes which I found very, very inspiring. The first one is, in a free enterprise, the community is not just another stakeholder in business, but in fact the very purpose of its existence. This quote reflects Tata's deep commitment to community and ethical business. The other one goes like this: no success or achievement in material terms is worthwhile unless it serves the need or interest of the country and its people. Our esteemed authors have encapsulated these powerful learnings in this exceptional book, and we are really excited to hear them share their insights with us today. This wonderful session shall be moderated by none other than Dr. Himanshu Rai, Chairman of IMA Indore and Director of IIM Indore. He shall guide us through the conversation with his wealth of knowledge and expertise. Let me now introduce the two distinguished speakers to the house. Mr. Harish Bhatt has been a part of the Tata Group for over 36 years, holding key leadership roles such as brand custodian at Tata Sons and CEO of Tata Global Beverages. After retiring, he continues as an advisor to Tata Sons and serves on the board of several Tata companies, including Trent and Tata Starbucks. A seasoned marketer, Mr. Harish has significantly contributed to the growth of renowned Tata brands like Tanishq, Titan, and Tata Tea. He was named one of the top 10 most influential chief marketing officers by Forbes in 2022 and 23. He has also played a pivotal role in strategic moves like the Tetley Tea acquisition. a graduate of BITS Pilani and IIM Ahmedabad, Mr. Harish is an accomplished author and columnist with 7 published books and recognition as a top LinkedIn voice in India. He balances his love for food with a passion for fitness. Mr. Harish Bhatt, on a lighter note, Mr. Harish Bhatt has mastered branding, writing and fitness. He is basically proof that multitasking is a myth unless you are a Tata veteran with 36 years of experience. Now I will take the privilege of introducing the second guest for today, Mr. R. Gopalkrishnan. He has had a corporate career spanning 58 years with 31 years at Unilever and 18 at Tata Group, where he served in senior leadership roles such as Chairman of Unilever Arabia, MD of Brookbond Lipton, and Vice Chairman of Hindustan Lever. He was also Director of Tata Sons and currently serves as an independent director of the Press Trust of India. Mr. Gopal mentors startups, is a distinguished professor at IIT Kharagpur, and is an active international speaker delivering inspirational talks. A graduate of St. Xavier's Kolkata and IIT Kharagpur, he has a management degree from the Harvard Business School. Mr. Gopal has taught on a variety of topics including business, strategy, innovation, using real-world anecdotes rather than theoretical knowledge. He has been a newspaper columnist and continues to write every month for financial papers. He has authored more than 20 books, including the likes of Inside the Boardroom, How Behavior Trumps Rationality. On a lighter note, Mr. Gopalakrishnan's career is so extensive, even his resume has a sequel. So, ladies and gentlemen, finally, please join your hands in welcoming our two distinguished guests, Mr. Harish Bhatt and Mr. R. Gopalkrishnan, along with our moderator for the day, Dr. Iman, who will be leading this fascinating discussion with our authors on the timeless leadership lessons of Sri John. Thank you, gentlemen. I would like to invite Mr. Ajay Dasundi from Zenith Drugs to please come on stage and present the mementos to two of our guests. Without any further ado, thank you so much. The stage is all yours.
Alright, thank you very much. I am in an awkward place and I can't see some of those people. So clearly, you may want to shift if there is a possibility onto the left side. What fascinated me about this book was one of the statements which was made that somebody in his speech in Bangalore was talking about the greatest Indians. And names that came in were Mahatma Gandhi, when it came to politics, Swami Vivekananda, when it came to social work, Rabindranath Tagore, when it came to literature, and Jamsetji Nasirbanji Tata. And obviously I can understand what it means because I don't know how many of you know this. In fact, they didn't know that I also happen to be a Tata person. GT of 91 batch, worked with Tata Steel for 8.5 years. And we used to celebrate the Founders' Day on the 3rd of March every year. And I would see people literally hugging and crying, hugging the statue of J.N. Tata. Such was love because you have third generation, fourth generation people. And by the way, the biggest festival in Jamshedpur even today is not Diwali or Holi, it's the Founders' Day. That's when you have processions throughout the city. The city is actually lighted up with everything. And therefore, our ancient scriptures always said, Etat desh prasutasya sakashat arvichandana swam swam charitram shikshurena prithvi vyam sarvamanva. That this country has produced many people who, through the sheer strength of their character, through their life, showed the world the right path. For example, when Gandhi was asked with one of the interviews by a BBC correspondent, what is your message? Gandhi said, my life is my message. He didn't need to say anything else. And therefore, if you look at J.N. Tata's life, I think his entire life was a message. So the way I'm going to conduct this, and we have an hour, slightly less than an hour, because I've spoken so much, is that I'm going to ask some questions. And if you can see that I prepared very, very well, normally people would have 3 or 4 of these thingies, of these stick-on notes. I don't know if there's any page left where I don't have a sticky note. But clearly, I'm not going to hog the entire time. I'm going to let you people come in. So anytime during the question and answer and during this anecdotal thing, if any of you feel the need to ask a question, please just raise your hand and I'll surely come to you. But the first question is to you, Gopal. I don't know if you have read this book or not, but all of this happened when Gopal made a call to Harish. Gopal, what made you make that call to begin with? And why Harish?
I can rationalize this, which is what I'm going to do. But I got the idea of this book just before I retired. And I said it's good to retire so that you have a little long view of your career. And in 2016, it struck me that there is something very distinctive about Jamshedji Tata. And every time I talk with Jamshedji Tata, this is not the biography of Jamshedji Tata, by the way. It is the 6 generations that have followed him, ending with Chandrasekhar Rao. And I said it is not that he was superior. That would be rather pompous. But there was something very distinctive. And what distinctive was kya hai? I felt like a young person who was meeting a 102-year-old grandfather and said, Dadaji, आजकल भी योगा करते हैं, पतले हैं, अकल चल रहा है, ये खाते क्या है? What is special about this grandfather? Casually, I mentioned this to Lily Aishwarya, who has done a penguin head, and she said, "Yeah, this will be a fantastic deco." So finally, she kept jumping on my back. I had to get her off my back. And I said, "Mera koi sathi ho to acha rahega." But this sathi was busy with his career, rightly so. But the day he retired, or approximately that time, I said, "Bande ko jaldi se pakad lo." And give him a proposal like I tried with my girlfriend many, many years ago, which he can't refuse. So I rang him up and said, "Will you co-author with me? I have a plan." And he said yes. And then we started working on it. I think within 2 years we finished because the architecture of the book was fairly well developed. We had been thinking about it. And that's the reason why I rang him up. And that's the reason why I'm happy. Because I had certain, for lack of a better word, I'm using the word philosophical ideas in my head. And philosophy works only when you tell stories. If you go to any Harikatha, he will tell you Ram did this, Krishna did that, then he will narrate some story. And I needed a storyteller like Harish, which I thought was a good fit. That's how the book came.
Wonderful. So at least now we know as to where it all began and how it all began. And so I've gone through the book, of course, word by word, and there's so many fascinating stories that I cannot overemphasize the power of stories. The entire culture of Tatas has actually percolated down to last person, not just these 6 generations, but to last person, even in the Tata, amongst Tata employees, purely because of stories. And when people ask me why stories, I am not going to discuss this in great detail, but do remember stories is what differentiates us from animals. We are here because there are stories about each one of us, and we live forever because there are stories about each one of us. There are no stories about elephant X or tiger Y, and therefore they will get lost in history. And therefore, Harish, to you, my first question is that in the initial part itself, you talked about an oxymoron called enlightened capitalism. And this reminds me that in Tata Steel, my boss, he's the only person whose name is still saved on my phone as boss. He used to actually give a presentation in business schools, which was on Tata's, of course. And the title of his presentation was "To be ethical and to be nil." Because apparently it's kind of weird. Can you really be ethical? And here I find a similarity. It resonates. Enlightened capitalism. Do tell us more about this.
So, people have asked G.R.D. Tata more than once, do you think the Tata Group is capitalist or is it socialist? And I have seen places where he's mentioned as saying it's both. It's, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But enlightened capitalism, I think, represents the soul of the Tata Group. And let me just narrate this to you. When Jamshedji Tata started the Tata Group, the first greenfield enterprise that he put up was a textile mill called the Empress Mills. It was located in Nagpur, which is virtually at the center of the cotton belt of India. And the Empress Mills became one of the most profitable enterprises of its time. In fact, it repaid its shareholders, I think, 20 times in a few years. I was told it was the most profitable enterprise of its time in India. But what Jamshedji Tata did in the Empress Mills was fascinating. He made it very profitable by using the latest innovations like the ring spindle. He made it very profitable by ensuring that he used the highest quality of cotton, long-staple cotton. But way back in the 1880s, he introduced it. The workers of the Empress Mills were semi-educated women and men, uneducated women and men from the hinterlands of India. Way back in the 1880s, he introduced for them access to insurance. By the 1890s, he had introduced a pension scheme for workers who had completed a certain number of years. And by 1901, in the Empress Mills, for the first time ever in India, he introduced something that all of us would have seen on our salary slips, those who work in corporates, the concept of a provident fund. And people went and asked him, Mr. Tata, why are you spending all this money? Why are you wasting all this money on welfare? This money belongs to your shareholders. In 1895, he delivered an address where he says, we are not more philanthropic, we are not more generous than others. We know this money belongs to our shareholders, but we also know that our prosperity and sustainable future depends on the prosperity and the welfare of our workers. And that, I think, was central to his idea of creating Tata Group. To an extent that the community became the nation in his mind. And when he looked at Tata Steel being founded, or later the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, he was only looking for what does this nation need? What can I do to deliver this to the nation? Eventually, his sons actually transferred their entire wealth to the Tata Charitable Trust, which resulted in 66% of the equity of our parent company, Tata Sons, that both Mr. Gopalkrishnan and I have been part of, belonging to the Tata Trust. And over the years, what has the trust done with this money? They have used the money created by the so-called capitalist enterprise Tata to create some of India's finest institutions. The Tata Cancer Hospital in Mumbai, the Tata Cancer Hospital in Kolkata, a network of cancer hospitals coming up in India today, the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. I can go on and on. So enlightened capitalism, Himanshu, is, are Tatas a capitalist enterprise in the sense that we use capital to produce business results? Yes, we are. But where does the fruit of that capital go? It goes back to society and back to the nation, which is what led J.R.D. Tata, our chairman for 50 years, to say, the wealth that has come from the people goes back to the people time. I think that is a good explanation for what enlightenment is.
Absolutely correct. And to all the women in here, 1921 is when Tata started the concept of maternity leave. We're talking about it now.
There is a very nice photograph. I don't know whether it's in this book or not, but there's a very nice photograph. 1921 in the Empress Mills, there was a creche for the children of working women. That was the far-sightedness with which the Empress Mills started by Jamshedji Tata. And it's amazing to me that a gentleman like that foresaw the future and did something like that, which is why Mr. Gopalkrishnan would have been inspired the first place to create a
The trigger was, I lived at the time I was in service in a bungalow in Bombay. That's absolutely unusual. In 1906 was the age of the bungalow. Zubin Mehta used to live there. He grew up there. And I was on the first floor. One day, the guy downstairs happens to be called Agarwal, but I'm not making any point of it. He said, "Yaar, Ahmedabad मिल्स में आप लोगों का कोई कारखाना था, उसमें एक ही बूढ़े का फोटो आया है, उसको मैं फेंक रहा था, फिर मैंने सोचा आपसे एक बार पूछूं, ऐसे मुझे दिखा दो." It turned out to be Jamshedji Tata's painting done in 1918 or something, you know. So I said, "ये तो बहुत valuable चीज है, हमको दे दो." And I took it to my office and I said, "This is an amanat." He was going to throw it away, saying, "किसी बुढ़े का फोटो कर, हमारे भी फोटो उठा के फेंक देंगे, ये तो होना ही है." So I'm saying there are a lot of emotional tweaks and adjustments that come when you work in Tata's. That's a wonderful thing.
Every time I'm asked, I still say I'm a Tata's person. It is never in the past sense. Because the stories have stayed, and in fact, even my own value system has been informed by those 8.5 years I spent in Tata Steel. And, just coming back to this, what you mentioned about what GRE said, here on page 51, now when Mr. Mulgaonkar actually created, or rather spearheaded Tata Chemicals, and he was actually creating it from scratch, he created a lake. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think the feedback speakers need to be. So, when Mr. Mulgaonkar actually created Tata Chemicals, he put in there a 100-acre area for a lake. And that lake currently has over 100 species of birds, and he was criticized by some at that point of time as to why he's spending all of this money on a lake. I mean, we are here to produce a chemical factory. And J.R.D. Tata said, "We did not have to create a lake and plant trees to produce a truck, but we did. What I'm most proud about is not the making of steel or trucks, but our social concerns." So I'm talking about Tata Motors in Pune. "What I'm most proud about is not the making of steel or trucks, but our social concern." Starting from J.N. Tata, who used to talk about the welfare of the people, to J.R.D. Tata, to Mr. Rusi Modi, who I'm sure all of you have heard famous statement when he was talking to a correspondent, and she said, "So what does Tata Steel do?" And he said, "We do tribal welfare, we do this, we do social work, we do blah, 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 blah." And she was puzzled, and she said, "Hang on, isn't your business something different?" And he said, "Oh yeah, we also make steel." And that, of course, became a tagline. Where does this come from? Both of you. Where does this come from? Where does this amazing character come from? And how has it actually percolated to every leader in the Tata community?
So, this is the key question that caught my fancy. There are a lot of great businessmen. There are a lot of philanthropic businessmen. They may be well known, they may not, they may be sitting in this room also. And I said, what is so distinctive and special that you have an idea, which we call a purpose in business, and then you're able to pass it down for 150 years? Because in many businesses, son, grandson, and then it sort of vanishes. And we created, in my mind, a metaphor of a river. आप प्रयागराज जाओ, गंगा देखो. It is very different from what is in Gangotri or Rishikesh. So the philosophy or the purpose of this company, of every company, is like a little Gangotri. It's pure. It is simple. Everybody can relate with it. And it looks powerless. इसमें कोई दम नहीं है. If you go to Talakaveri in Cook, you'll find exactly the same. It's literally a trickle. But by the time it comes down, it creates civilizations. It creates stories. It creates geographies. We would not have Vrindavan and Ayodhya and all the stories that we are all blessed to have, but for that river. Everything happened Ganga Maya ke tat pe, Jamuna ke tat pe, Kaveri ke tat. And then it finally reaches the Bay of Bengal. And the company I liken to a river. So Jamshedji philosophy was like a trickle. It started, it's pure, it's very simple. क्या बोला? मैं समाज के लिए काम करूँ. इसमें कोई आया है मैं आप पढ़ाएंगे भी नहीं. आप शायद पढ़ाएंगे, but many people will say इसमें कौन सी बड़ी बात है? And by the time it came down, it created one civilization called Tata Steel, another civilization called Tata Motors, another one called Tata Chemicals, and so on and so on. And to tell you, those who worked in these companies will tell you, हम तो अलग हैं. Tata Motors is different from Tata International. दुबे जी बैठे हैं, हम बोलेंगे आपको. Tata International का culture अलग है, Tata Steel का अलग है, वगैरह वगैरह. So सभ्यता अलग है, लेकिन आपका मकसद एक है. That is the unifying feature of a river. आप गंगा के तट पे या तो हरिद्वार में बात करो, या बदायूं में बात करो, या इलाहाबाद में बात करो, या पटना में बात करो. गंगा मैया से गंगा मैया, कहानी अलग हो सकती है. And you referred in the beginning to the 3rd March. Tata's the rituals. So there are companies, but they all serve certain rituals. सब लोगों का दिवाली होता है. सब लोगों का वो कहानी अलग है, but दिवाली होता है. सब लोगों का नवरात्रि होता है. The manner of celebrating may be slightly different. I think that's how a very simple and elegant philosophy has been passed down through civilizations. And I calculated once that if you take the total number of employees Tata has today and an estimated number of the number of people who joined Tata and left the last 20-30 years, before that they're all gone, it comes to almost 3 million, 2.5 million. If you multiply that by 4, for an average family size, there are 10 million people who have got this, their blood. You're an example. You left Tata long ago. Your career is somewhere else. I think this is what has enabled Tata. And this is the Raz. Why we wrote this book. कि एक गंगोत्री को लेके प्रयागराज तक पहुंचना with all the multiple civilizations is something nature has given us. Our stories have told us. Why can't we do this? Because I would love to see India have 100 Tatas. In fact, I must close my little response to you. We're recalling a young economist called Mukherjee. He's a Bengali chap. And the year is 1912. It's 9 years after Jamshedji had died. And he wrote to Alfred Marshall, who was the top economist in those days. And he said, I want my country to progress. What should India do to progress? And Alfred Marshall wrote just 2 lines. He said, if India had 100 Tatas, nobody can stop it. This is not available in the archives of Tata, by the way. This is available in the archives of Alfred Marshall. So, by writing this book, and by talking to you, by spending a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, because there is a little Tata in everybody. I'm hoping that India will get 100 Tatas. Why 100, 1,000 Tatas? That would be rewarding, though we get nothing out of it. But it's rewarding for this country, because this country has a potential which nobody should be able to stop.
And in fact, this has been the story of the Tatas, that they've always been underestimated in the initial time. And obviously, people had to chew and eat back their words. And my favorite story, obviously, is the one where in 1899, when Mr. Jain Tata talked about making railway grade steel, the then Chief Commissioner of Indian Railways, Sir Frederick Upcott, he said, did you say that Tata's proposed to make steel to British specifications? Why, I will undertake to eat every pound of steel rail we succeed in making. For sure, in 1911, Mr. Upcott would have had a massive case of indigestion, because Tata Steel was making steel and to their specification. Now, one of the other interesting things that I came across is that you have Harish likened J.N. Tata to Arjun, because Arjun was also called Sabyasachi, which means he was multidextrous. And likewise, J. Tata was multidextrous, simultaneously thinking about a hydroelectric power and a higher institute of science, IISc, the Institute of Science. What is this trait and how important is it?
So J. Tata was indeed, multidextrous. Let's look at what all he did within his brief lifespan. He didn't live too long. He passed away at the age of about 65. So he didn't live for too long. And he started the Tata Group in 1868 by when he was already 30 years of age. So he, look at what he did for India in those 30 to 35 years of his career running the Tata Group. He founded Tata Steel, which was India's first integrated steel plant. And he did it at a time when India did not have the technology for steel. He had to go to the United States and convince one of the finest engineers of the US, Charles Page Perrin, to come and stay in India to help him to create Tata Steel. And he had to go to the US by ship, 18 days one way, 18 days the other way, walk unannounced into the office of an engineer, convince him to come. Tata Steel. He thought of India's first major hydroelectric project, which is today called Tata Power. It used to be earlier Tata Electric. And the first dam came up at Walwan on the Western Ghats, and half the city of Mumbai was fed clean electricity through that hydroelectric power. Continues to be fed until half the city of Mumbai. Apart from steel and hydroelectric power, he thought of India's first University of Science and Technology. He was a businessman and he was thinking about creating a university for the country. At a time when the British Viceroy of India at that time, Lord Curzon, put several blogs saying, will there be enough students to study here? Will there be enough professors to teach here? Who will fund such a university? And then Jamshedji Tata said, doesn't matter, I'll leave half my wealth to the creation of this university. Even then he was blocked, but he decided to go right up to the Secretary of State in London to get permission to run the University of Science. Until today, it is the top ranked science university in India, and perhaps the Indian Science University, which always appears at the top of it. Apart from these three, when he saw Mumbai was down with the bubonic plague and people had fled away from Mumbai in the 1890s, he decided to create the Taj Mahal Hotel. Until today, it's the symbol of luxury and hospitality in the country, and it's withstood 2 world wars, 2 pandemics, a terrorist attack, and it's very much part of the skyline of the country, not just the skyline. So he did all this. In addition, he introduced the J. Tata Scholarship for Indian students going abroad for studies, which continues until today. 5,000 Indians, including a former president of India, have obtained the J. Tata scholarships. So he did so many of these things together. So he was indeed multidextrous. So what Himanshu says is absolutely right. And the reason that he was multidextrous, I think, is that his mind was constantly restless and travel. He was reading a lot. Every evening, I am told at 8 o'clock after dinner, he used to retire into his library. He used to travel a lot. In a single year, he would visit several countries, despite the fact that travel was very arduous at that time. And he saw what Japan was doing, he saw what Germany was doing, he saw what England was doing, and he said, why can't my country have all these industries, have all this progress that I am seeing in so many other parts of the world? So that also created a restlessness, both reading and travel. He was influenced by people like Dadabhai Naoroji, Firozshah Mehta, Swami Vivekananda, all of whom he met and he knew during that period of time. So they influenced him to think even deeper about what a merchant like him or an industrialist like him can create. So all of this led to his multidextrous thinking, but I think it was also tribute to the man. He was built like that. He was a visionary, he was a pioneer, he was very courageous. He did not mind, despite Sir Frederick Upcott saying, I need all the steel that you make, he didn't stop it when he heard some skeptical remarks from him. And remember that he did all this at a time when the British were ruling India. They were not necessarily inclined towards Indian industrialists making textiles and steel in the country, which would bring down the imports from their country, from Manchester and from India. So it is tribute to the man that he was multidextrous even in such an environment. And truly speaking, I think it's also the mark of a pioneer. He was able to start up so many businesses.
Himanshu, may I add a small point?
Please.
If we go very strong on a well-deserved accolades of Jamshedji Tata, the audience may walk away from this meeting saying, हाँ यार, ऐसे भी हस्ती थे, लेकिन हम तो उस कैटेगरी में नहीं हैं, तो अपना छोटा सा धंधा चला. If you tell me too much about Mahatma Gandhi or Ram or Krishna, it happens to me also that we say, मैं कह रहा हूँ कि इनसे दो सबक सीखे थे, जो हम each one of us can do. Our purpose of the book is not to eulogize somebody who died 120 years ago, not to make a hero out of him, but to say that it's continuing to happen. And the story that, since you asked the question, I reply. There are two things that Jamshedji did, which is success of the monks done, which is important to bring up. First, he embraced the future. ये बहुत important है. We tend to live in the present or the past. So he embraced the future. In fact, my book just before this was called Embrace the Future. What does it take to embrace the future? The second thing that he did was something that he passed on to other people. Take risk, but make sure that you have a plan B, that you can manage that risk. So if you see subsequent to Darshit, why did Ratan Tata think of making India's first completely indigenous car basically in the auto city of India? No imports. Back in 1990s, people said, Parsi hai, ho gaya, thoda paani ho gaya. But Sakar karke dikhaya. And today, all the foreign brands have come to India. But the Tatas and the Mahindras are still leading the auto industry. Right now, Chandra is saying India needs chips. हमको इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स से काफी दूर है, लेकिन हम सीखेंगे. एयर इंडिया इज बीइंग पुट बैक. उसकी जो हिस्ट्री है वो हिस्ट्री हमारे घर की बेटी को किसी ने ले गया. 80 साल के बाद when she is older they are sending her back. अपनी बेटी को नहीं लेंगे, 10 साल लगेंगे. So there is this act of faith in embracing the future, which I just wanted to bring out, so that it is not all seen as something that nobody else can do. ये हम हर इंसान के ये capacity है. And I just wanted to trigger that.
And that, sets 3 triggers inside me. The first trigger is what I like and equally dislike about the book, is that they have come up with 10 P's. I thought it was our job, the management, teachers, to come up with 3 P's and 4 P's and make everybody's life miserable. They brought in 10 P's. How on earth are my colleagues going to wrap their head around this 10 P's is going to be another interesting story. But I have a very provocative question for you. And I hope you may like to respond. There is this thing that when J.N. Tata decided to go for the Indian Institute of Science, he met Swami Vivekananda on a ship. And he requested Swami Vivekananda to talk about it because there's a lot of barriers which were being put in. And Swami Vivekananda, lo and behold, wrote about the need for that in an article within a few days. And therefore, here were an industrialist and a monk coming together for a cause. Today, monks are becoming industrialists. Any comments? Which is better?
Okay, so I researched that story quite well. Swami Vivekananda meeting Jamshedji Tata. And it's true, the two of them met on a ship from Yokohama to Vancouver when they were traveling from Japan to the US, and spent that time talking about the US business. Even at that time, Swami Vivekananda was convinced that monks need to develop a scientific component. It was his strong belief that monks, apart from having a spiritual depth, should also have a scientific depth in the country as well. And that is why when he spoke to Jamshedji Tata, I think their wavelengths matched. And that's one of the reasons that Swami Vivekananda strongly supported the founding of the Indian Institute of Science. So I do believe that monks developing a scientific depth, the history of science, this entire science of genetics actually came from monk in Europe. Gregor Mendel was the person who understood the science of genetics. So I think it's very, very possible monks and industrialists are not really that far from each other. but I will refrain from commenting on current monks and traditions.
But can I add a story? I think it's in the book, but I'm not sure it's in this book. Of how Swami Vivekananda as a monk influenced another great industrialist. He went in 1893 to Chicago, and we all know the story of Swamiji in Chicago. And he made a huge impact. One day, the people in the audience said to him, "You're telling us all this. हमारे सर के ऊपर से जा रहा है, धंधा करते हैं, पैसा कमाते हैं. Can you tell us in a very simple way? We are going to bring John D. Rockefeller. You see, John D. Rockefeller was living in the Antilla of those days. He was the world's richest man, Standard Oil Company, etc. So Emma Calvin, who was one of the French disciples of Swami, invited John D. Rockefeller, who came. I've taken the story from the Swami Vivekananda papers. And he said, He said, I believe you're a very wealthy man. He said, yes. Are you how many times richer than the average American are you? He said, I don't know, maybe 100 times richer. He said, do you think you're 100 times smarter than the average American? He said, I must be, otherwise I won't have 100 times the money. He said, has it ever occurred to you that you are a mere pipe through which the wealth has to pass back? He said, what nonsense is this? I've never heard of such a ridiculous. It took another 14 years. John D. Rockefeller gave all his money to the Rockefeller Foundation. So, monks who are genuinely spiritual, through their curiosity and simplicity, have the ability to influence people in ways that even they may not have thought of. Here is a monk. I'm a great admirer of Swami Vivekananda. I make no bones about it. He influenced Tata. John D. Rockefeller was. And that is saying something. How many monks can you name who named two industrialists? The biggest in America, the biggest in India. I think it's worth paying a duff your cap to these monks also. But not all monks.
Well, absolutely. One of the things that we've always seen digressing a little, is that predominantly, if you look at the past, the ancient rishis were also the scientists. So philosophy and science always went hand in hand. And I always say that you can't be a good scientist if you're not a philosopher. Because science can tell you how to make better and better guns and better medicines. So the philosophy will inform you when to use guns and when to use medicines. So they need to go hand in hand. And particularly now that we're talking about driverless cars, etc., the ethical questions are going to become paramount. Now, one very important thing which has been brought out in this book amongst the many important things is when Jamsetji was looking for Bezonji Mehta to join, Jamsetji said, I want a person who had common sense, honesty, intelligence, and an open mind. Jamsetji really didn't care about the technical skills. We have an ongoing debate in management sciences saying what is more important? Person job fit or person culture fit? Would you like to talk a little more about it? Because I think there's a lesson for everyone, all of us over here. What do we look for in a person?
I'll just narrate the story of Bezonji Mehta and then hand over to Mr. Gopalkrishnan to draw out some lessons from this episode, which I think are very relevant to all of us. So, Jamshedji Tata had decided to build this textile line in Nagpur, and he was looking for a manager to run that plant. He knew that he would have to come back to Bombay at some time, and he would not be able to stay in Nagpur for a long time. So apparently, and Mr. Gopalkrishnan has visited this place, apparently there was a club that Jamshedji Tata had founded a club along with some fellow Parsis, and there he was discussing what he needs from such a person. And apparently he told the people in his circle, I need someone with common sense, with integrity, with the ability to work with people, and I'm looking for such a person. Now, Bezonji Mehta, who I think is the first ever professional manager to join the club, in a long line which now includes all three of us on the dais. Besonji Mehta started his career wrapping old newspaper in kirana shops. He didn't have education, but he was so fond of learning that he always used to carry an English dictionary so that he would learn and learn and learn. His second job was as a ticket inspector at the Baikula railway station in Delhi. And apparently he did so well at the ticket inspector job that he was promoted as station manager of the railways. That was the kind of career that Besonji Mehta had, and later he became a goods agent for the railways. So Jamshedji Tata, his name was recommended to Jamshedji Tata, and when Jamshedji Tata met him, he was convinced that this man has common sense, he has the right acumen to run a factory, and he has the right ability to work. And he took a bet on Besonji Mehta and appointed him as an assistant. Besonji Mehta rose to become the head of that factory, ran Empress Mills for the next several decades, not just years, splendidly. Later was knighted by the King of England, and Jamshedji Tata has gone on record saying if Empress Mills achieved all this, it is a tribute to the managerial prowess of Besonji Mehta. So this is the story of Besonji Mehta. He was recruited for attitude and he trained for skills, but later he became an expert on the textile industry. And he was consulted by the government for various things to do with the textile industry, despite not being from the industry. So very clearly recruited for attitude and then skills he trained over the course of time. Mr. Gopalkrishnan, of course, has headed the HR function in Tata Sons. And he will have
I will add a personal experience. This episode that he is referring to happened around 1890 or 1880 or thereabouts. Cut to 100 years later, 110 years later. And I'm narrating a personal experience, but it's not in the book. But it speaks to the point that you raised. So I was happily sitting as Vice Chairman of Hindustan. 31 years, I was comfortable. I knew everything there is to know about Tata and soap and shampoo and all that stuff. I get a call saying, will you meet Ratan? I said, for what? He said, he may have an interesting blog named Tata's. I met him. Of course, papers had been exchanged in advance, etc. And then he said, I'd like you to join the board. You mentioned Tata Motors, Tata Chemicals. And I said, I know nothing about motors. Power. बिजली कहाँ से आता है कहाँ जाता है मुझे पता है नहीं बटन दबाना है इसलिए इतना मुझे मालूम. He said, if I wanted you to be skilled, then I wouldn't recruit you. I like your attitude. I think you can be valuable to Tata. This is 120 years after Besonji. I'm not saying I'm the next Besonji, but I'm just saying that there is this feeling in Tata that you must recruit people for attitude. And yet you look at and then I joined Tata, and I was very happy for the next 19 years I spent in Tata. But most of us recruit for skills. We say, वो बंदा अच्छा है, उसको सब कुछ आता है, we take it. We don't think about attitude. I'm a chairman of an NGO. They keep on getting a CEO, वो 2 साल रहता है फिर चला जाता है. They say, what are we doing wrong? Skill, कितनी अच्छी है इसकी skill. I said, are you recruiting for attitude or skills? He's got terrific skills. He has done this, he has done that. I said, change your attitude, change your priority. And that's a lesson I think all of you can think about. Recruit a person for attitude, you can teach him skills. But you can't teach a person with skills the right attitude. That's a big thing.
Does not bode very well for us to give degrees. But clearly we are making all those changes in the curriculum to make sure that we're developing the right attitude, people with the right attitude, apart from the skills. Now, I am done with 1/10 of my questions. So at this point of time, I'll probably turn to you because I don't want to hog on the time, like I said before, I come up with something more. Any of you, would you like to ask a question? Is there something from the book or something that has triggered inside you the conversation that we've had so far?
By the way, I applaud IMA. I don't know what you all eat for breakfast every morning, but you all have a natural curiosity. I've been coming to IMA for, 20 years, 15 years. Jagdish Bhai knows his youth and my youth. I've been coming here for a long time. And there is something which is infectious in IMA. Curiosity, wanting to know more, किस बंदे का माथा खराब है कि संडे मॉर्निंग उठ के 10 बजे आके किसी को मार You people are crazy. So I applaud it and I want you to keep up that attitude.
Good morning. See, I have picked up out of many important things which you have said. Two things. One, that if India needs 100 Tatas, that is one thing. And the other thing is that he was having that embracing the future. J. Tata Sahib was having embracing the future. Now, my question to you is that probably what I think is that people from industry or industrialists might not be having that kind of attitude. Say, when we start or when they had started their career, they are having, and still people are having career vision. And probably J. Tata Sahib was having contribution vision. He wanted to contribute to the nation. So that is one thing. And if industrialists, all of us know, and we learn good lessons from Tata Group, which I can say this is one of the finest groups India has produced. So why don't people learn from it? This is my question. And what comes in between?
Yes. I emphasized in the beginning that there are a lot of flaws also in Tata Group. You're insan hai, how can you be all Kubians and no negatives? In fact, in the book we have covered some of our errors or faults, but they were of judgment, not of ethics. Tata Finance happened after I joined Tata's. Nothing to do with my joining Tata's, by the way. But the scam of Tata Finance happened. Long before our time, we started a shipping company and then that didn't work out. It was not mentioned. The important thing is India has many Tatas. They may not be that well known. इस कमरे में बैठे हैं. So, the purpose of this is not to say we should have more people at Tata, but to bring out the point कि हर इंसान में इंसानियत है. उसको जरा आकलन करके आप लोगों को निकालना है. That's limited. I think there are great other companies, Bajaj, Godrej. I can go on and on. Then you think why I didn't mention some other names. Let's not get into that discussion. But I did a research project with the academic people, SPJ, about 5 years ago. And I said, let's find out 5 or 6 companies which are looking Tata-like. Maybe another 50 years, like if you want to select tomorrow's cricketers, you go to the university, Ranji Trophy. With great difficulty, I could list 10. इतना आसान नहीं है. And I looked at the statistics with the Ministry of MSME, Ministry. You know how many enterprises India has? कोई अंदाज लगाओ, कोई anybody?
1 million.
कितना?
1 million.
63 million. 6 करोड़ enterprises हैं हिंदुस्तान में. उनमें से कितने की कैपिटल 10 करोड़ है? आप बताइए. 19,000. 62.81 million capital less than 10 crores. And I'm not talking of 1880 money, I'm talking of 2018-19 money. Of the 19,000 which have a capital of 10 crores, how many are listed on the stock exchange? 4,000-5,000. Of the 4,000-5,000, how many account for all the transactions? Roz Damrubazi Sensex gone up, down, 200. Are we a land of pygmies? We are not a land of pygmies. And it is trying to get that natural Indian genius. Because remember, philanthropy is not unique to Tata. Merchant philanthropy in the Marwadi Samaj, in the Bhatia Samaj, in the Chettiar Samaj, is well known in this country, well documented. आप सब में है. But I'm hoping that this is not a great story about Tata. Tatas will inspire, I hope, but many more will come up if we keep talking and thinking about it. And I would like to recommend, since you are also the chairman of IMA and IIM, should have a program on how can we create, I don't want to call it Tata-like companies because that's too arrogant, but sustainable, humane, enlightened companies. India needs 10,000 sustainable, humane and enlightened companies. Business करना है तो इबादत के साथ करो, इंसानियत के साथ करो, इनायत के साथ. There is no business which will not work these 3 I's. So I just thought I would.
No, and I absolutely understand what you say, because recently, and this will come out soon, I've written a book, co-authored a book on crisis leadership. And one of the publishers that I was talking to, he says, Himanshu, please write on crisis of leadership as your next book. He says there's a serious crisis of leadership, and when I teach, in my teaching days, when I teach leadership, I would ask people to name leaders. I would give them a certain definition, and that definition obviously included ethical context. And I would say name leaders. People would actually struggle to name leaders from the present part. All the leaders were from the past. And therefore, clearly, what you're saying is something that needs to be deliberated, but perhaps we shall deliberate it in one of the academic council meetings of IIM. Let me take some more questions.
Hi, I'm Govind Agrawal from Anaxi Digital Runners. Just to answer your breakfast question, it's like, we eat poha, jalebi and same most of the time on the breakfast. My question is like, we are in digital age, so much internet. We're talking about businesses which were started in the 1800s. How much of information technology, digital information helps in building business? Or there is something else? Because right now also we struggle building our businesses. And we are talking about 1900s when there were so many people. How much of information actually helps build business?
Let me try to answer this. Firstly, thank you for the information on breakfast. Poha was really nice this morning, and it's quite unique, the taste of steamed poha here. But technology, one of the lessons that we can learn from Jamshedji Tata was as a pioneer, he embraced the technology of his age. Digital and AI may be the technology of our age, but it is important to embrace the technology. Let me give you a small story. When he was building the endless mills, he wanted the mills to operate at the maximum production. And he was told in England, someone has invented something called the ring spindle, which is used for the manufacture of textiles. But even the English mills of Manchester are not using it because they think it's easy to use. But Jamshedji Tata got an Englishman to go there, understand the ring spindle technology, bring it to Nagpur, and implement it in the endless mills in the 1880s. And that resulted in the productivity of the mills going up. When Jamshedji Tata was building the Taj Mahal Hotel in Mumbai, he brought the best technology from Europe for the lifts in their hotel. It was one of the first buildings to be electrified. For Turkish baths, to build the ice factory in the hotel. So he embraced the technologies of his age very, very strongly. And I think embracing digital and AI in today's age is a no-brainer, because they are changing the world as we go. And in the next few years, AI is going to change the world as we go. So, in my view, if you have to be very, very alert to how these technologies are impacting whatever business you are running, and also make sure that we explain, we learn from these technologies day after day and see how we can utilize them in our businesses. Because otherwise, at some stage, they are going to swamp our business.
And the same thing with TCS, the origin of TCS, two computers.
Yes.
Two computers.
It's not like you can take examples, you can take Jamshedji and you may think ये हर चीज पे Jamshedji की बात करते हैं, but that's because गंगोत्री पे जाते हैं, फिर आहिस्ता आहिस्ता नीचे आते हैं नैया में. But the same thing is true of TCS. Vakil Chand Kohli came back with a master's degree from MIT, and he was happily in Tata Power because he had become an expert in the power distribution systems. उसको बोला कि तुम जाके information processing करो. He said, यार मैंने क्या गलती की है? He has told me this himself when he was alive. Keep me यहाँ पे फंसा. Then he said, let me start. And those days TCS, information technology very differently. ऐसा बढ़ गया. See, history is such that it's known after the event. At that time, nobody knew कि ये कहाँ से कहाँ जाएगा. Out of faith, you did it. When I joined Tata, and that's only 1998, I used to get monthly statement. TCS सबसे नीचे था. ढूंढना पड़ता था कहाँ है. Tata Steel, Tata Motors, Tata Power, वो सब ऊपर थे. आहिस्ता आहिस्ता ये बढ़ के एकदम नंबर 1 पे आ गया. I'm sure if my great grandfather came here, he'd say, Tata, हाँ वो कपड़ा सूती कुछ बनाते हैं ना. My grandfather came here, he'd say वो कुछ लोहे का चीज बनाते हैं. My father was here, he'd say कोई ट्रक बहुत बनाते होंगे. I think of them as an IT company. My grandson would say ये तो chips बनाते हैं. That is परिवर्तन. That is embracing the future. Embracing the future may happen through technology, may happen through non-technology, but that has to be a continuous process. Otherwise, there is no opportunity. So,
and also, one of the things which is mentioned in the book, I don't know how many of you know it, but 1 in every 2 Indian uses a Tata product. That's the stat. And to me, I think the most humbling moment was I had gone to my village after a very, very long time. Earlier, I used to spend all my summer holidays there. And I was waiting at the railway station because I had reached the Gauri Bazaar railway station very early, and the taxis मतलब tractor वगैरह कोई मिल नहीं रहा था मेरे को गांव तक जाने के लिए. And there was a person sitting there. This is 4 a.m. in the morning. There's this person sitting on that same bench where I went and sat on a very small railway station called Gauri Bazaar. He asked me, Babu, क्या कर रहे हो? What do you do? This is Bhojpuri. I said, I'm Tata में काम कर रहे हैं. I work with the Tatas. And he said, हाँ तो ये को तो कंपनी पता है इसमें Tata और दूसरा Bata. And I felt so nice about this that this person sitting in, it's not a very remote village, but a remote village. And this guy also talks about Tatas with the same respect that we who used to work with Tatas used to have. Your questions.
Can I just add a small point? Because this gentleman was very kind to be able to say this is what 2 lessons I have learned out of our discussion. I want to add a third lesson. Create a company which people respect, they also love. It is possible to create a company which everybody respects. बड़ा कंपनी है, शूशा है, बड़े-बड़े शादी होते हैं यहाँ वहाँ पे. Create a company which people can love. What he just mentioned is love. Love is not logical and rational. When I was switching from Hindustan Lever to Tata, my parents had passed away. I wanted some seniors' advice. No matter how old we are, we look to our seniors. My eldest sister was alive at that time. I said, I'm thinking of making this change. She said, यार मुझे corporate sector से कोई मतलब नहीं है. I don't know what company should be. But they say that Tata does good for other people. तो ठीक ही होगा तुम्हारा निर्णय ज्वाइन कर लो. वो blessing के साथ मैं Tata. This is called love. She had no rationale. So create companies which people love. It might be a small company, it might be well known only in Indore or Mao, but let people love that company. That's important.
So, honesty, hard work, and team. But one of the most important things, please guide us. And one more thing, why corporate get fails? One thing about the failure of the corporate, which we should take care of. Why corporate fails? Why corporates fail?
It will be for 30 seconds for an economic pay.
So, I will respond on one thing for success. And if through my career of 37 years with the Tata Group, as well as studying Jamshedji Tata and Jayati Tata, one thing that I've come across which is essential for long-term success is integrity. Telling the truth, being transparent with customers, giving customers what they really need, being true with the quality of your products, with the pricing of your products, the service that you provide customers, what you do for the community. So I think integrity is the basis of trust. A company and a brand succeeds if people trust. And people will trust you. You cannot demand trust. You have to earn trust. And you can only earn trust not by speaking but through your actions. And those actions have to demonstrate. So I believe that that is the most important factor for you to succeed. And there are quite a few stories in this book which we have related, which show you how integrity can be the foundation of success. Why do companies fail? There are many reasons, unlike one reason that you mentioned. But I think many companies fail because they become very arrogant. They think that they know everything. The world changes, customers change. So if a company thinks that they know everything, by the time the world changes, they have not been able to adapt to the changing customer and the changing world. And that to me is one reason for failure. So Mr. Gopalkrishnan referred to embrace the future. If the Tata Group had remained only a textile firm, which was our original enterprise, it would not have been as large as it is today. I don't even know whether it would have survived that. The fact is that the Tata Group changed with the times. From textiles, there was steel, there was hydroelectric energy, there was airlines, there were trucks, there was IT services, there were cars, there were consumer products. Today, there are semiconductor chips which are being talked about in the future. So, the group has been able to evolve and change with the changing times. So he said, our great grandfather would have known Tata as a textile company. Our great grandson may know it as a semiconductor chips company. Huge change. So I think one of the reasons companies fail is to become arrogant, they think they know it all, and they don't adapt to the change.
I'll sneak in also my view over here. I completely agree that integrity to me is what makes Tata's stand out and what makes any company successful. An example that he was also talking about Tata Finance, the scam that happened. Tatas did not brush it under the carpet. They immediately went and told the public, at the same time assured them that every penny of yours will come back. And obviously he also owned shares, but he slept well in the night. Because he knew that if the Tatas have already made this statement, then clearly nothing can go wrong. I think that is integrity and that is the trust. Harish talked about why companies don't succeed. I'll tell you why startups don't succeed. Since I work with a lot of startups, it's dilution of vision. In all the startups that I have mentioned, one common thing was dilution of vision. They start with a great intent, and that would be my next question, because they have used the word niyat in the book. They start with a great intent, they start with a great idea, then comes the first investor, thoda sa idea idhar se udhar chala jata hai, then comes the second investor, and ultimately what I see is in a year, or sometimes even less than a year, they're doing something completely different, simply because of the pressure that comes from the people who are investing in companies. So if you lose sight of your original vision, or if you dilute your vision, very unlikely that you will be successful. And I'll come to your question a little later, because I have one and then I'll come back to you. So, one of the things that you talked about was this pioneering thing. And obviously we talked about Air India, which was earlier the Tata Aviation Company. And there are two P's that come to our mind over here. One is passion. Gianni has the passion of flying. And I don't know how many of you know this, but in this book it is mentioned that the entire aviation company started with 2 Usmans. But because Gianni Tata fell ill, he could not fly them. He actually took the 2 Usmans apart and brought them on a ship as his personal luggage. So that is passion. And second is humility. And I want you to respond to this, because people underestimate the power of humility. I've had the good fortune of meeting Gianni twice, and I don't want to embarrass myself again in that story. When Mr. Mulgaonkar completed 25 years, this is what Gianni wrote to him. As I think of what you have achieved during this quarter of a century, I feel that if the only thing I had done for Tatas was to inveigle you into the firm, I would have earned my salary for the whole of my career with them. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. How does this kind of humility come inside a person? This is humility at some other level. Anything from your experiences with Gianni or Mr. Ratan Tata?
Your work with Mr. Ratan Tata. I would make it a broader
answer. Because the moment I say Ratan Tata, J.R.D. Tata, then firstly, everybody thinks that he came with the culture way. That's not the point. You know, humility is unnatural to have. Arrogance is very easy to have. So you have to push water uphill to get humility. You have to do nothing to get arrogant. Because it's pretty simple. A little bit of power and you have. And I think J.R.D. used the word. I mean, I don't work with J.R.D., so I don't know him personally. I met him only once before I joined Tata. But he used the word a leader. If somebody asks what is the most important thing that you need to do, the leader must be affectionate. Now, very few people will talk of leaders who are affectionate. Very few people will talk of companies that you must love. But these are all so in some other sphere. And I'd just like to mention one episode. We had a director called A.D. Shroff. And A.D. Shroff was like Nani Palkhiwala. He's the finance minister India never had. I mean, he was the top economist of his day, 30s, 40s, 50s. And on a particular board meeting, 1951 is when this board meeting happened. J.R.D. Tata was 37 years old. A.D. Shroff was rather older. Kuch matbed ho gaya. And A.D. Shroff came and wrote a letter. Dear J, used to be called J.E.H. J. Today in the meeting on this particular point, you called me dishonest. I resent it. Nobody can call me dishonest. Second, I know it's your name that's on the brass plate also. So you have the right to do whatever you feel like. I would like to resign. I couldn't find this letter in the Tata archives. I found it in the A.D. Shroff Memorial Archives. Now, what is humility? It is a matter of your achar, not your vichar. Look at J.R.D.'s reply. He says, Dear R.D., I have received your letter. I did not call you dishonest. I said the argument that you have put for this particular point is dishonest. And something I'll explain. Second, you say my name is on the nameplate outside. You know, I own less than 1% of this country. This is our company. It just so happens my name is there. Problem you and I both have, we are both short of temper. Can we put this behind and carry on? This is humility. इसके लिए बहुत मेहनत करना होगा. And I would not say much more by giving other people examples to say that you have to work hard to make humility. As I'm getting older, I have to work harder to keep my body supple. It cannot be what it was 30 years ago. But to even keep it functioning, I have to work harder. If I think, just look at B.K.'s Iyengar's yoga and I'll also be fit like him, it will not happen. So you have to work very hard.
There are, since you referred to Suman Gopalkrishnan very much, I'm going to take the liberty of just narrating one more story which has impressed me. And this involves J.R.D. Tata and Suman. So Suman Gopalkrishnan was the managing director of Telugu, which is today Tata Motors. And he used to meet J.R.D. Tata quite often to discuss various matters. So once, he expressed some strong reservations about the decision that J.R.D. Tata had. And apparently J.R.D. Tata lost his temper, like happens with many of us, and said a few harsh words. So Suman Gopalkrishnan went away very distraught, very, very upset from that meeting. And apparently he told one of his colleagues, what is the use in speaking to J.R.D.? He doesn't understand what I say. But within a couple of days, J.R.D. Tata on his own accord went across to Suman Gopalkrishnan, met him. And then later, and this is a letter that I have found, again not in the Tata archives, but in the book written by another person who worked with Suman Gopalkrishnan. Here is J.R.D. Tata's letter to Suman Gopalkrishnan, written after that. He says, Dear Suman, remember that Suman Gopalkrishnan was reporting. J.R.D. Tata was the chairman of the group, and there's a lesson here for all of us. He says, Dear Suman, I apologize for my outburst. I have been under great pressure at home and on my trip to Jamshedpur, and am a bit of an insomniac to rest. So I am unduly sensitive and was hurt by a criticism which was well meant. My affection and admiration for you. signed Jia. This is the letter that he sends to a person who is reporting to him, handwritten letter. This is an expression of humility. All of us in our own lives can think about this. As Mr. Gopalkrishnan says, humility is easy to talk about and difficult to practice. But when you look at examples like this, what will inspire us to bring a little bit of that practice into our lives?
And we can probably keep telling stories, but my another personal favorite about how Giardi used to be humble enough to do even the smallest of his things himself. And this was narrated to me by Dokai when he was visiting me, Dr. Tata, who obviously has come to IMA on a couple of occasions. Dokai was narrating the story that Giardi and Dokai were flying together and they landed at a place and they were very active. Giardi used to have this suitcase with the letters, embroidered letters, Giardi. So, when the Giardi's bag was coming, like one would normally do, Dr. Rani kind of extended his hand to pick up the suitcase from the carousel. And suddenly there was a slap on Dr. Rani's wrist, and that was Giardi admonishing, with an admonishing finger in his face, and he says, Jamshed, if I need your help, I will let you know. And then he picks up his bag and goes away. So, humility even in these small things. And I think that is something which, like Gopal also said, very, very difficult to bring inside, but it works. So I think we're running short on time, but there's a question there, so I'll take that question and then try to wrap up things here.
So, what I found, the name of Telco was not mentioned today, but regardless of that, regardless of that, MCG Notion is embracing the future was his act of going into business as a son of Parsi priest. And when he changed the name to Tata's, was it an inspiration or some suggestion or some event that took place, if you are aware of the name?
So, how did the name Tata come about? Okay,
because in that era, it was customary to adopt like a poha wala or a Parsi name party wala, something like that.
From a profession. Most Parsi names are from
So
the
when
profession.
Jamshedji Tata was alive, which is only till 1904, he named all his first few firms with national names. Taj was called Indian Hotels Company. Tata Steel was named after his death. When he wanted to put up the Institute of Science, even today in Bangalore, people would call it Tata Institute, but actually it was right at the beginning called Indian Institute of Science. The mill was called Empress Mills. It's only after his death, or around the time of his death, that his successors said we should keep the Tata name. So subsequent companies were called, even the hydroelectric power station was called Virpuri Hydroelectric.
So my question is about is using Tata surname.
How did the Tata surname come?
Yeah.
Okay, the best story that I have of this is from Frank Harris, who wrote his biography in 1935. Since you're asking such an old question, the Tata surname apparently came because in Zoroastrian language it was a word for Dikha. And one of the ancestors was a little Dikha fellow. But this is speculation. I don't vouch for it, it's not a historical thing. You know, saying, why did he not have a professional name? The name Tata seems to have come from there. But this is also speculation. I won't vouch for it.
Interesting philosophical difference between the work of Tatas and work of Ambanis. That was one part. From that emanates my question. We all are entrepreneurs here who are probably hoping to become Tatas someday. But we are small and we are first trying to become a unicorn and then further on. Gopalji, you have worked with several MNCs and you are very aware of the entire Indian corporate scene. What is it? You know what? It is good once you have surplus, you can be ethical. Once you have surplus, you have humility. Once you have surplus, you can do whatever you want for the community. All of this emanates once your product is successful, once your company is successful. we are in the process of becoming that. There is a certain kind of philosophy in Tata's that as soon as I joined Tata, I imagine myself under that guard and I behave and work in such a way wherein I try to bring cutting edge knowledge and I try to learn myself to be able to be that useful to the organization. What is it that brings this kind of a culture amongst the employees from top to the bottom, which creates the Tata what Tata is today, which we would like to know, and I think you can advise us on. Thank you.
So that is just to correct it, because our money didn't exist in the early time. Even if he existed, nobody knew. All I can say is this. I joined, unlike Harish, who joined when he was 25, straight out of IIM, young and fresh, without any preconceived idea. I joined at 52. मेरे दिमाग set हो गया था. And I came in with the natural skepticism and even cynicism. देखते हैं यहाँ पे कैसा चलता है. But the one thing I learned very early in Tata's, that it doesn't matter whether you're the top management or the bottom management or even a worker. That feeling that you must serve other people before serving yourself was prevalent everywhere. And I think as I unearthed this, I found that it is a natural way of working. When people say, so soon after I joined, nothing to do with my joining, but soon after I joined, earthquake happened, And I found Ratan Tata, Jamshed Irani, Krishna Kumar, Shyamal Gupta sitting around a table discussing हम लोग भुज के लिए क्या करेंगे, earthquake के लिए. I don't mind confessing now. I said the top management of this group are sitting and discussing Bhuj earthquake instead of how to reduce steel costs or truck making. ये कैसे survive होगा? But then it took me a little bit of time to find out that they see that as their problem. And I can tell you one thing, what I saw being done in Bhuj was something that changed me completely. That top management doesn't mean you're sitting and reducing costs. There are lots of people who can do that. But top management make sure the commitment. So when the leaders walk the talk, then the example becomes clear. The leader doesn't have to say it. People must see you doing it. And I think it's the behavior of Tata leaders over generations that probably makes the difference. That's my guess. You know, you're Dubai sitting here. Back in 1980s, I also used to be the export director of my company. Shyamal Gupta, probably many of you don't know, but he knows Shyamal. You would never think of him as a top-class ambassador for India. But you go anywhere in Africa, from Cape Town to Cairo, and say Shyamal Gupta, they will know. Because he's so adaptable in his way that he made friends everywhere. And Mr. Dubeji was sitting in Ethiopia for 10 years or 7 years or something, trying to take the next step forward in Ethiopia. He was telling me last time when I was chatting with him. So that must have shaped him. I was shaped by what I saw of Brother Tata. He was shaped by what he saw Darbari say to Krishna Kumar. So दूसरों के नियत और नीति से हम सीखते हैं, नियम से नहीं सीखते. That's the short answer.
So I want to give you a different perspective, but I think I joined the group at 25, as against 52 in Mr. Gopalkrishnan's case. I was a young boy just out of college. But it's true, what I saw with the leaders that I worked with. My first boss was R.K. Krishnan. I then worked with Darbari Singh. I worked for a brief while in Success Design. For many years, I worked with Bhaskar Bhatt. What I saw of leaders within the Tata Group like that was behavior with absolute integrity, was their ability to meet all the commitments that they made, and was their ability to contribute to society and community at large. So you saw that through their actions, not so much through their words. But also I can tell you, 27 years of my working with the Tata Group, 1987 until today, not once has the Tata Group asked me to do anything which is against conditions. And that enables you to sleep well, which is worth its own weight in you. So when that kind of behavior happens in a company, then I think the values within the company shape automatically. And there are tens of thousands of people like me who have worked for their entire careers.
So continuing with that, I joined when I was 21. So it's like, so at a very, very young age, and I've worked there for 8.5 years. But about Gopal's story, so I was there at IIM when the earthquake happened, and I felt the earthquake, it was destruction. The first set of people who came after the local administration and the Indian Army, on the third day, on the 28th evening, I got a call from my mountain guru, Bachendri Pal, who came in with a supply of relief work and other supplies. And I met her at the Ahmedabad railway station and then went along with her to the Puja day. First supplies, the first boots on the ground, so to say, after the Indian Army was Tata Steel. So that is Tata. Alright, so much as I would, love to take all of these, but I'm a stickler for time and it's 12. So that's it. What we will do is, I will not allow Gopal and Harish to leave till we have had a couple of informal conversations. So thank you very much to all of you on coming on a Sunday morning. And obviously, like I said, half of my questions are also still unanswered. But I would like to, on behalf of everyone over here, thank the two of you, first of all, for writing this book. Not only are these powerful learnings for corporate success, these learnings are relevant, but I think they're also relevant for us, for our personal lives as well, not just for the corporate life. Because, when I read this book, and like I said, I've gone word by word, there were so many reflections that I had, not just about how I should do things at IIM better, but also how I can make myself better. So thank you very much for, first of all, writing this book, for being who you are, and for bringing all of these stories to all of us. And thank you very much, all of you, for listening to us very, very patiently and for thoughtful questions. And I apologize to those whose questions we have not been able to take, but we will certainly, like I said, I will not let them go for another 30 minutes or so, and we will take those questions outside. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Himanshu Rai. What an exceptional and inspiring session. I'm sure you would all have had your takeaways from this session. There were numerous, but a couple of ones which I loved and I have noted them. I'll just quickly share with you. You have to work very hard to stay humble. Embrace the future, and this should be a continuous process. Take risks, but you must have a plan B. Business करना है तो इंसानियत, इबादत और इनायत, the 3 I's के साथ करो. Create a company which people respect and at the same time people love. Integrity is one of the most important aspects of trust, and the trust is the most important success factor for companies. Embrace change to avoid failure, and a leader must be affectionate. These were my learnings from today's session. I'm sure you must have had your own. So what a fantastic session this was. A heartfelt thank you to Mr. Harish Bhatt and Mr. Gopalkrishnan for sharing your deep insights and learnings from the life of Jamshedji Tata. And of course, a very special thanks to our own Dr. Himanshu Rai for taking us through this fabulous discussion. Thank you, sir. To all the wonderful people out there in the audience, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope you found today's session as thought-provoking and inspiring as I did. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
So, common thing is Tata.